At long last, it's time to step outside. Pull the camera out of the bag and get to the part we've all been waiting for. You've scouted your locations, you know when the light will be best. It's a beautiful day and the air is just right for photography. Today, our lesson takes us to a little mountain town in Colorado. Manitou Springs is filled with quaint streets, classic architecture, and plenty of locations for outdoor portrait photography. All right, once again, let's do a quick tour of the campsite. We're at our first location. Pass this off. So all of our shooting is going to be taking place back in this direction. So we've got a series of images that we're going to work on from here. As we go past our camera gear, once again, you can see that our additional gear is in front of the cameras so that we can always keep an eye on it. You don't ever want to have your gear behind you because that's the fastest way for it to walk off with some stranger while you're concentrating on your beautiful model. Ashley will be over in this direction and we're placing her up against all of this really fantastic architecture. Look at all these beautiful panes of glass, all these little street lamps. This is going to be an outstanding location and we can't wait to get started. Here we go. All right, welcome to our first location. We're in this beautiful little plaza. There's a park over to the side and there's this really beautiful old building. It's got lots of amazing architectural lines that we're going to bring into our image. One thing I want to talk about first, there is a menu taped to the glass wall back there. If Ashley moves out of the way, you can see it right there. It's very distracting. So we're gonna make sure that she is always blocking the menu because it's kind of a distracting background element. We wanna try to keep our lines clean and simple for the most part. What we're gonna do is a quick exercise in depth of field. Again, people are always asking, how do you get that beautiful out of focus backdrop? So first part of the equation is a nice telephoto lens. So I'm gonna shoot a series of F numbers. We're gonna start at F2, and then we're gonna see how you get that beautiful contracted depth of field for the creamy out of focus backdrop. And then we're gonna adjust a few settings, go to F11, and we'll see how even just changing a few settings, we basically expand our focus almost to the entire scene. So let's get started. Another quick note, it is July in Colorado, but it still gets a little chilly, so it's good to be fashionably warm until it comes time to shoot images. Bring a jacket, bring layers, and then when it's ready to shoot, jacket comes off, pictures go, shoot's done, jacket goes back on, stay warm. All right, cool. Okay, so before we really launch into this lesson, I want to do a quick depth of field preview. Right now, I am at ISO 125, f2.8, okay, so the iris is wide open. This is going to give us a very shallow depth of field and create that creamy out of focus background that people want to get. I'm at shutter speed 125, white balance is set on shade. Let's shoot off a few frames of Ashley with these settings, and then after these are done, we're going to change up our settings around, go to F11, and show you what it looks like to build out a more expanded depth of field. So first off, shallow, here we go. All right, looking sharp, I like it. Chin down a little bit, there it is. I like that, and nice and tight. Winning. Cool, all right, let's do something. Let's block the menu, come back out and block the menu just a little bit. That's good. Do one where you're kind of like standing and your body is just facing the park. There we go, and come on off the wall and block that menu for me. Let's do just a good headshot. Just stand up nice and straight, and then boop, tilt your head down, there we go. That's brilliant, I love it, nice and simple. All right, friends, let's jump right in. We want to be able to give you a perspective of what the camera is actually capturing real time. And I think we're off to a really great start. This is a beautiful image. Ashley looks fantastic. Our light is just perfect. And as you can see, we have created a shallow depth of field. This is primarily due to the aperture, f2.8. This means that the iris of the lens is wide open. This gives us a very contracted, shallow depth of field. Now, photographers use this technique in order to basically control the level of focus that the audience sees. Right now, all I see is Ashley. Ashley is not competing with all of the visual elements that occur in this building. We have a lot of beautiful architecture in our scene, but at the same time, all I can see is Ashley. This is important because when you're shooting a portrait, you want to make sure that your subject rules the scene. When we throw a couple of grid lines up here from a compositional standpoint, we can see that Ashley is more or less placed in the upper right third. So we're giving the audience a little bit of breathing room. You can see there's a lot of negative space falling off to the left side as the focus falls off completely and we get this beautiful dissolve. So I think we're off to a really great start. And if I didn't know better, I would say that the color of Ashley's dress perfectly matches the architecture. Who would have thought? Maybe we did a little bit of scouting ahead of time. Alright, as we move along into our next series of frames, we can once again see that our aperture is at f2.8. That hasn't changed. We are continuing on with the theme of a shallow, contracted depth of field. Now, from a compositional standpoint, Ashley is actually creating a very beautiful shape. Her hand is situated very casually at the top of her head, her elbow is in the top right of the scene, and then as we follow her arms, she creates this beautiful diagonal line that goes all the way across from the top right all the way to the bottom. Again, I'm really excited about how these initial images are coming across. So let's see what else we can do. And excellent. That's a good, okay. All right. So now that's a really nice preview. We've got a very shallow depth of field. Next, we're gonna change a few settings. Let's go all the way up to F11. We're gonna have to compensate with ISO. ISO is gonna have to go all the way up to 1600. Not ideal for portraits, but this is just an example. We're gonna fire off a few frames like this, and we'll be able to see how our depth of field gets larger and larger and larger, and the environment becomes more and more sharp. Not necessarily ideal for portraits because you don't want your person having to compete with all the in-focus background. But again, F11, let's see how this looks. All right, same thing. Very good, very good. Nice, nice. Actually looks good regardless. F11 or F2.8, it doesn't really matter. And now, for the basis of comparison, here we are at F11. We've contracted the iris and expanded our depth of field. As you can see, the architecture of the building is a lot more prominent. We no longer have that creamy, out of focus background. And I dare say, I could probably just about read what the restaurant has for lunch. Our dreaded menu has made an appearance. Let this be a lesson. Always be cognizant of your environment. Ashley looks fantastic, but again, I'm just about to read what the menu has for lunch, and so that's kind of a distracting element. Another thing we'll notice is that in order to achieve F11, we had to go to ISO 1600. If we were to zoom in on this picture, we would probably start to see a lot of grain or digital noise, and that is not ideal for a portrait. Coming up, we're going to look at f2.8 versus f11 side by side to kind of give you a basis of comparison on how these two portraits shake out. All right, we got it. Okay, so that should give us enough footage and images to be able to kind of showcase the difference between a shallow depth of field and a wider depth of field. All right, nice. All right, now that we can see our two images side by side, it's easy to tell the difference between a shallow depth of field and a larger depth of field. On the left, we have f2.8, a shallow depth of field. Ashley looks fabulous in the center of the scene, and the background falls gracefully out of focus. On the right, pretty much everything is in focus because we're shooting at f11. We have created a larger depth of field. This is almost what you would expect from a landscape picture, not so much a portrait. I can see a lot of background elements. Again, the dreaded menu has made an appearance, and Ashley is having to compete with her environment. On the left, at f2.8, there's no way that the viewer can be distracted by anything. The viewer is locked in on Ashley. That's exactly where we want the viewer to be. On the right, there are quite a few distractions that are going to take the viewer away from the subject. Ultimately, this all boils down to your creative assessment. The point is that you have control over how your image looks. If you want a shallow depth of field, shoot at f2.8. If you want to expand your depth of field and increase the level of the environment that comes into the image, shoot at f11. Personally, I'm partial to a shallow depth of field. I feel like the image on the left is mesmerizing. I can't take my eyes off of it, whereas the image on the right, it's just another snap. Regardless of our opinions, you have the control to create both images. And how your final product turns out, that's all up to you. All right, next, we're gonna do a little exercise in focal length. This is a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, which means we have a lot of range to work with. I'm gonna start off at 200 millimeters. We're gonna come in nice and tight on Ashley and get a headshot. Then we're gonna come back out to about 120 millimeters and get a medium shot. It's gonna bring a little bit more of the environment into perspective. And then we're gonna go all the way out to 70 millimeters, and that's really gonna bring all of this beautiful architecture into our image. And it just goes to show that you don't really have to move around a lot or overthink your photography. You can stand in one place and get 3 unique looks. So let's see what we can do. We're gonna start off 200 millimeters, in tight headshot. All right, sweetie, ready? Here we go, in tight on the headshot, that's beautiful. Drop that other hand down for me a little bit so I can see it. Yeah, very good, very nice. All All right, and let's kind of like, yes, that's good. Bring it down so it's a little more level with your face. I like that, that's good. Lovely, lovely. All right, here we are at 200 millimeters. This is the focal extent of the lens, and it gives us the ability to really zoom in on Ashley and isolate her from her environment. Again, we're at f2.8, which gives us a very shallow, contracted depth of field, and all the viewer can do is concentrate on Ashley. I'm not distracted by any other element in the scene, and in my personal opinion, this makes for an excellent portrait. All right, so we've just finished off the 200 millimeter headshot. We came in really tight and got a nice close angle. Next, we're gonna dial back into about 120 millimeters. This is gonna give us a medium shot. So we wanna make sure that we communicate that with our model. So Ashley, we're coming in at a medium shot, a little bit tighter. And here we go, let's see what we can get. All right, medium it is. Looking lovely, brilliant. Right back towards me. All right, now here we are at 120 millimeters. We've pulled our telephoto lens back to the middle of the range, and as you can see, we have drastically reshaped the composition of the image. We are still at f2.8, which gives us that beautiful contracted depth of field, but as you can see, I can actually see a lot more of the background elements more or less in focus. They're not completely thrown into a total blur, and that is an effect of having a shorter focal length. Once again, the dreaded menu has made an appearance. If you are a Photoshop genius, you could very easily take that out of the equation. We will, of course, be doing lots of Photoshop later on in this tutorial, so be sure to stick around for that. But in the meantime, I love this image because I can see Ashley and her hands are engaged in the image. It's often quite difficult when you're shooting portraiture, especially at a longer focal length, to be able to bring the model's hands naturally into the image. Fortunately, Ashley's really good at all of this, so we don't have to worry about that for this scene. But once again, at 120 millimeters, we're starting to really bring a little bit more of the environment into the image, and I can see Ashley from the waist up. It's not just a headshot, so there's a lot more going on in this image, and there's a lot more that we have to pay attention to. All right, as we progress into our 120 millimeter setup, I feel like we might have accidentally captured a beautiful accident. I'm not entirely sure that this was a planned image. I kind of think we took a little bit of a break. Ashley was sort of taking a breather, and I just so happened to hit the shutter button. And honestly, I feel like this is a beautiful, candid moment that looks very natural, and I just love the way that this image turned out. Accidents can be amazing, so always be cognizant of your environment. Shoot your model, maybe even when she's not paying attention. Penicillin was discovered by accident. Not that we're curing diseases here, but you get the point. And here we are with a very classic, standard, engaging picture. Ashley is focused in on the camera, she's looking directly into the lens, she's got her canned, hello there, smile, and it looks fantastic. Our architecture is starting to make more of an appearance in the image. I can just barely pick up the dreaded menu right over her shoulder, but honestly, it's not that distracting because it's kind of far out of focus, and we have some beautiful vertical elements starting to take place in our scene off to the left side in our negative space. Let's see what else we can do when we start to pull the lens back even farther. Oh, that's beautiful. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Nailed it. Cool. All right. Very good. That gives us a great perspective on the medium shot. Next, let's dial all the way back to 70 millimeters. This is gonna allow us to bring a lot more of this beautiful architecture into the scene. We're gonna go a little bit wider. We're gonna be probably knees up on Ashley. I'm gonna get down a little bit lower. And again, communicate what you want with your model. So here we go. All right, Ashley, we're gonna be a little wider on this one, knees up. So I'm gonna get a lower angle, shoot these frames here. That looks wonderful. Awesome, awesome, yes. Brilliant, I love the back, yes. All right, towards me and kind of like hands on the hips and a sassy, fun little smile. Very good. Let's put both hands on the hips. Turn towards me, contrapposto, yes. Put a little bit of shoulder distance between your legs there and lean in on one hip. And now here we are at 70 millimeters. We've gone as wide as our lens can accommodate. And as you can see, we have definitely brought a lot more of the environment into the picture. I am once again looking at the dreaded menu, although it's not really that distracting because there's so much going on here. Personally, I find the beautiful lanterns that are hanging out in the top left of the screen to be quite charming, and in that case, I'm not particularly offended by the menu, and if I didn't actually bring the menu up, the viewer probably would never notice it. If I'm being completely honest, this image is starting to take me a little bit outside of my comfort zone. Ashley has a lot of environmental elements to compete with. There is a very distinct diagonal leading line kind of cutting right through the middle of her head. That could be bad, that could be good, depending on how your creative intuition takes you. Personally, I feel a little bit safer when the lens is zoomed way in and the environment is completely blurred out. But as we get farther into this lesson, JT is going to bring some wide-angle lenses into the game, and you're going to be completely astounded at what you can accomplish. So don't feel like every single portrait has to be 200mm f2.8 creamy out of focus background. Portraiture is a vast and expansive universe, and you can do all of the things that you want to do as long as you have the knowledge. In this case, we got a little bonus. Ashley is actually reflecting in the window on the right side of the screen, so we get two people for the price of one. You probably would never accomplish this with a very tight telephoto shot with a shallow contracted depth of field. So as you can see, bringing the lens back to a slightly wider angle gives you unexpected bonuses. Sassy fun smile. Cool, nailed it. All right, so there we have 3 unique perspectives, 1 lens. I didn't move my feet the entire time. Ashley stayed put the entire time, and we were able to get 3 unique vantage points, which gives you a lot more expansion when you come out and shoot on location. You don't have to be a one-trick pony. All right, let's get on to our next session. With our initial images safely captured, we find ourselves off to a good start. But this is just the beginning. The lessons ahead will take us into a whole new world of possibilities. Coming up next, JT breaks out the wide-angle lenses and pushes Ashley's many talents to the limits. Things are definitely about to get interesting, and we'll see you in the next lesson.